Hello, a lovely sunny good afternoon to you all. Here we have another weekly edition of my little 5-minute podcast, 5 or so minutes podcast. This week I thought I'd talk about a phenomenon that I see and is renowned really in small business worlds, which is what we call the hiring and firing cycle. So basically business owners, start to get a bit overwhelmed. So they start to think about hiring some folks. They have high hopes for their performance. Those hopes get dashed. Eventually the people get fired again. The business owner goes, it's easier if I do it myself. Then they get overwhelmed again. So then they think about hiring again, and so on and so forth. And so the cycle goes on. And it's kind of, disappointing for everybody concerned and kind of unproductive, and kind of helps a business kind of get stuck in this particular size and revenue and takeover and all that kind of stuff, rather than perhaps doing that growth, going on that growth journey that they may be looking for. Now, this is brought to life beautifully in the book called Clockwork by Michael Michalowicz. And I definitely am seeing that in some of the stuff that I've been doing with small business leaders. When we find ourselves in this cycle, I think two things happen. The first one is we think, well, maybe all the good talent is already gone. There's, the people who are here to hire are like the second 11. All the good people are already hired. Or maybe we start to wonder whether there's something wrong with us or our recruitment process. And in my experience, there is something that can be done about the recruitment process that can make this a little bit easier for folks. When we hire, I think, particularly at the point where we're probably overwhelmed and we just need a spare pair of hands, we go for the easy option. So we go for somebody who we think can hit the ground running. So they've already got the skills, they've already done the job that we think that we want them to do. They've got a proven track record, nothing for us to do, because after all, we're super busy. We don't want to spend our time upskilling somebody. We want them to just come in and hit the ground running and crack on and help us be, more productive, more successful, and less busy overnight. And as a result, we tend to look for what I call backward looking things. So we look for skills, we look for experience, we look for track record. And I think this makes us hostage to a couple of things, 3 things in particular, actually. I think the first thing it makes us hostage to is those who are good at writing a CV or who are good at interview. And the two don't necessarily correlate. So being good, if you like, in the selection process doesn't necessarily equate to being good in the job. And I'm sure you've come across plenty of folks who, kind of good on paper, not in reality. I think the second thing it makes us hostage to is, a little bit of deviation from the truth, maybe a little fluffing, a little zhuzhing of that actual experience. Maybe it wasn't quite as described. Maybe you call something an account manager and I don't call it that. I think it's something different or bigger or smaller or whatever that might be. And I think the third thing is it means that whoever we do finally take on, maybe there's not room for them to grow with our business because we've looked at what they've done, not at what they can do. And actually that means that maybe they become, we outgrow them quite quickly. And that makes us then have to fire and start again. So instead, I guess I'm encouraging you to think about hiring for attitude and aptitude instead. So I know I keep saying this, but 80% of our performance is down to our mindset. And for me, a self-starter is much more powerful than perhaps that one thing that we've ever been able to do. A kind of a quickness to learn or an ability to learn is potentially more powerful than that one thing I happen to know about what it is that you want from your business. So we should be looking for people who have potential, the ability to grow, the ability to do things like learn and self-start and be curious and find out the answers for ourselves. And less searching for people who have performance, i.e. I have done great things, partly because that's subjective and partly because that doesn't give us anywhere to grow. It's a bit like, buying clothing for kids. You always grow them, you always buy them a little bit bigger just so they can grow into it. Otherwise you'd have to throw it away within like 2 or 3 weeks or something. And just to prove that this can be successful, recently I worked with a chartered surveyor and we had a conversation about what differentiated good from great performance in their organization. And unsurprisingly, to me anyway, it all came down to attitude and aptitude. So we went looking for that. The job advert that we co-created was heavy on the attitude and aptitude requirements and less heavy on the knowledge and skill requirements. And I'm pleased to say that that hire has been an absolute blessing. killing, they're storming, they're super successful. In fact, they actually said to me, they are properly amazing. What lovely feedback is that? Their new hire is properly amazing. And not least of which, that properly amazing new hire has actually facilitated a whole bunch of other great things and growth in the business as well. So the right people can have a really fabulous impact on our business. Something to, perhaps tuck away for future consideration is whether or not your performance management system is contributing in some way to this hire and fire cycle. And I'm going to talk about that next week. So do tune in if that sounds of interest to you. So if you feel like you're stuck in a hiring and firing cycle, let me just kind of reiterate, you're not alone. This is a common phenomenon, but there are ways out of it. The key way out is using attitude and aptitude when you go searching for that new fabulous talent. Now, that's definitely something I can help with. I've helped other folks with it. So if that sounds like something you could do with some help with, then do get in touch. And tune in next week, as I say, for that performance management discussion that we'll have. Until then, have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.